This podcast is part of Mishmash Media. Hey folks, Ivan here. Just letting you know that the following episode was recorded in the year 2020 for Patreon, and it was the first time we watched it, so some things we say may be a bit out of date. We hope you enjoy it anyhow. Howdy folks.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm very good. How about yourself, buddy?
Good.
Good. Welcome to another episode of Curbcast. This is a episode-by-episode review of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And unlike our other podcast, our Seinfeld one, but I don't want to be a secondary character, for Curbcast, we get the episodes in chronological order and we review them scene by scene. My name is Ivan.
And I'm Stephen.
And we're up to episode 6 of season 2, and this episode is called The Acupuncturist, one which I thought, Stephen, wasn't too bad. I mean, not one of the funniest Curb episodes, but it was okay, I guess.
Yeah, like last week, I thought this was a bit weaker than what we've seen in season 2 so far, and certainly season 1. But yeah, a few good moments here and there.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. It was very similar to last week as well. But anyway, let's get into the plot for The Acupuncturist. Larry promises to pay an I was trying to say an accountant. An acupuncturist. What am I talking about? There's no accountants in this one. There's a lawyer, but not an accountant. Larry promises to pay them $5,000 if he can cure his neck. Meanwhile, a struggling writer asks Larry for a $5,000 loan, which he promises to pay back after his father dies, who happens to have a heart condition. In this episode, the cast includes Ed Asner. He plays Mr. Wiener. He is Barry's father. Barry is the struggling writer. Jeremy Kramer, he actually plays Barry Wiener. Scott Adsit, he plays Joel Reynolds, the Casual Fridays lawyer. Keone Young plays the acupuncturist, as per the title. And Ruth Rudnick, she plays Barry's wife, Carol.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Do you have any trivia for this episode, my friend?
No, I didn't see any trivia for it.
Nah, likewise. Anyway, let's get into it. Scene 1 of The Acupuncturist. Larry is with his acupuncturist where he talks about the failure to fix his sore neck from many different specialists. The acupuncturist claims that his treatment will work, and Larry offers him $5,000 if he can fix it, and he says that if he can't, then he won't pay for any treatment, and the acupuncturist accepts the offer. So the acupuncturist, it sounds like he's pretty, he stands behind the product he sells. He thinks he can actually do it.
Yeah, even Larry says that he admires his confidence, and the look on his face suggests that he's going to get $5,000.
Yeah, which is like, you can see the look in his face, how he's just really excited and happy. You know, he's like, oh, $5,000. I mean, I'm not saying that he's probably a struggling acupuncturist, but, you know, $5,000 for one client, that must be a lot.
Yeah, I mean, looking at his clinic, you see it later on in the episode when he's saying goodbye to his wife. But, I mean, especially if he's an acupuncturist in Hollywood, I imagine he's treating some pretty high-profile and wealthy people. I don't think he's struggling, but $5,000 for most people, even if you're a multimillionaire, is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for Larry, well, he's worth nearly, $500 million, but even $5,000 for him can bite him in the ass later on in the episode.
Yeah, that's right. And I think for the acupuncturist, it's also the satisfaction of knowing that it's not the money, you know, counts for a lot because it's $5,000, but also just winning a bet is very satisfying in and of itself. Yeah,
and also basically proving that you can actually do what you said that you were going to do, because it's a family tradition. He is acupuncture, and he says that his family's done it supposedly for centuries.
Yeah, and we were commenting before we started recording that as far as we knew, acupuncture was more of a Chinese traditional medicine, not a Japanese traditional medicine, but maybe at some point in the past it crossed over. We don't know. Neither of us are experts in Chinese or Japanese medicine history, but if you know, please let us know.
Yeah, and I keep saying after, you know, in most episodes, we're not talking about the secondary characters for Curb, unlike Bidwabars for Seinfeld, so I think we'll just leave it open to interpretation.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Next scene, we see Larry going to the deli to pick up some goods, and he sees his old mate Barry working behind the deli. Barry, it's revealed, is a former writer for SNL, and like you said, he's struggling. He can't really get any writing gigs. He seems a bit embarrassed, and Larry's trying to sort of play it down. And yeah, then sort of the main plot point is set up by Barry asking for a $5,000 loan.
That's right, because he claims that his father's actually really wealthy and he has a heart condition, and he promises Larry that as soon as his father dies, that he'll pay Larry back the $5,000. He's pretty keen on it.
Yeah. He's very confident as well. I thought it was a bit sort of, I guess, unethical or tasteless to say not to ask for money. I think that's, you know, fine if you really need it, or, you know, everyone's got different standards when it comes to borrowing money, but just saying that I can guarantee it because my father will die soon, it just seems so tasteless and tactless. It's very, very icky.
Well, obviously for Barry, he has a lot of animosity towards his father because he explains that, his father's very wealthy and he's been successful, but he won't even give his son any money to, survive, and he's got to work in a deli.
But at the same time, he shouldn't rely on his father. I get that he's a struggling writer and he probably feels embarrassed and like a bit of a failure because he was working on SNL and I'm sure that was lucrative and high profile for him, and now he's selling meat in a deli. That's a big fall. So I understand why he would feel embarrassed and a bit bitter, but to expect your father to bail you out by giving you money before he dies out of his will is just... Ooh, I just don't like that.
It rubbed you the wrong way, huh?
Yeah, what about you?
Oh, yeah, I thought it was a bit unethical. I think Barry, he's probably, obviously, if he's still struggling, then he's not doing good enough. Obviously, he's not finding the right connections. And it's funny, Barry could at least talk to Larry, because Larry would have lots of contacts, for Seinfeld and other projects he's done. You'd think Barry would just say, hey, do you know anyone who might need a writer? And I'll try and make my own way through.
Yeah, I have no problem with people, asking for help or reaching out for help, especially professionally. To sort of give them a leg up. I think that's perfectly okay. But to sort of rely on your father's imminent death as a way to pay someone back, I think once deaths and wills are involved, it makes it a bit more gross.
Especially when he's got a condition as well and he could die any day.
Yeah. And I also just think it's kind of until, I don't know, when it comes to wills and estates, it can get a bit complicated, especially if there's family issues. But to expect money to be paid out to you before someone's death, it kind of defeats the purpose of a will. It's well, this money is mine, but when I'm dead, it has to go somewhere. It's not money you give out before you die. It kind of defeats the purpose of having a will and an estate. It was just a very strange line of thought for Barry. But, if he must be struggling very hard because he sort of goes in on Larry asking for the money straight away. And the fact that he's thinking he resents his dad, I guess, shows that he's quite desperate.
He's quite desperate and, and he hasn't seen Larry for ages. So even, Larry's stumped when Barry asks him.
Yeah, and you can tell Larry's a bit uncomfortable as well.
Yeah, he is very uncomfortable, but he, eventually gives him the money, which we find out in the next scene when he tells Cheryl. Cheryl berates him for doing it. So she berates him for making the bet with the acupuncturist and giving money to Barry or lending it to him. You've lost $10,000 in an afternoon.
Yes, yeah, and she calls Barry an arsehole.
An arsehole, and she calls Larry, surprisingly, I didn't expect this at all, she calls Larry a pussy for lending out money to people that he receives, she calls him a pussy for lending out money to people. A pussy. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, for not being able to say no. And Larry tries to justify it saying, you're mistaking being nice for being a pussy. Cheryl's like, no, there's a distinct difference. There's nice and there's you. You're a pussy.
You're a pussy. That's totally out of left field for Cheryl calling her husband a pussy. I didn't expect that one.
I think in this episode, I got a sense that she's just generally speaking starting to get sick of his shit. So I think she's resenting him a bit more. I think it's building up to, because I do know that they separate, I think in season 5 or 6, which we'll talk about way down the line. But maybe because, Larry David loves sort of continuity and long story arcs. Maybe from a writing point of view, he's starting to plant those seeds now of Cheryl just showing more of a general resentment for Larry and just sort of, now she's just giving him shit. She's not backing up her husband. She's just saying, you're a pussy, which is pretty harsh, especially from your wife.
Exactly. Whereas in season 1, she would have easily defended him.
Yeah. And even if she was confused by his actions or didn't agree, she wouldn't have insulted him. She would have just asked him to explain himself, not just straight up insulted him. So I think, it was quite surprising to see that sort of just straight up insult from her. It's just like, wow, you don't have to agree with him. You can think it was a dumb thing to give two strangers $5,000 and then another $5,000 in the near future when he loses his acupuncture bet. But I understand why she's frustrated, but to turn that into an insult was very surprising.
Very surprising, yes, but you're right. These are the seeds planted by Cheryl, which for the eventual separation.
That's it.
In that scene as well, Larry actually receives flowers from the acupuncturist, and he wonders why he may have done that. And he tells Cheryl that Barry invited them to his wife's surprise party. In the next scene, Larry and Jeff are at a Japanese restaurant wondering what the orchid delivery means. Larry's estate lawyer Joel walks past and meets Jeff, and Larry asks Joel why he's in casual clothes, and he says that it's casual Friday in the office. And the waiter brings out a flambe and lights it before his sleeve catches on fire, and Larry throws water onto it, making it look like he's doing a great thing, and it makes the waiter angry.
Yeah, the waiter is viciously furious.
He is upset.
And it sounds like
he has it in for Larry the whole time.
I think so, yeah. It sounds like he curses him as well. I think he's speaking Japanese, and it sounds like he gives him a curse, and Larry just doesn't know what's going on.
It's crazy. He's that waiter, like, you think that the waiter, Larry was doing the right thing, and the waiter just berates him.
Yeah, I'd rather a wet t-shirt than a melted arm.
Exactly. I don't know what their story was. He must just be generally an angry person that makes damn good food.
Yeah, maybe. One thing I thought was again, a bit lazy writing. We kind of talked about this in this week's episode of our Seinfeld podcast when we talked about the junk mail. I got a sense that the writing was a bit lazy, and it's starting to show a bit in Curb Your Enthusiasm, where just to advance the plot, people who become important later on in the episode just show up. They always just run into people and then they come back later on. And it's getting a bit old.
Yeah, you mentioned that
and for some reason
it's so convenient.
Yeah. But I'm noticing it in Curb Your Enthusiasm, like maybe every 2 or 3 episodes, a secondary character who becomes important for maybe the second half of the plot always just turns up. They're out at a restaurant, or they're out running, or they're out somewhere, and then they'll run into someone and be like, oh, hey, it's you. And then, in the next scene or 2 scenes later, something important will happen with them. It's a relied upon writing trick that they use a lot. And I've just sort of noticed it in this episode because, Joel turns up and then he's an estate lawyer, which, is probably not a very common form of lawyer. Most lawyers are like corporate lawyers or prosecutors. And it just so happens that Mr. Wiener needs an estate lawyer. It's just very convenient writing, and it does frustrate me a bit. Anyway, that's my little gripe.
Fair enough. But the question is, how would you introduce these characters who are pivotal in later scenes?
Yeah, no, look, I'm not saying that I have a better solution. I'm just saying that as a viewer and as someone who, when reviewing these episodes, is a bit more thoughtful about what's going on as opposed to just sit back and enjoying it for what it is. You notice those things. If we were just watching this casually in our own time, we probably wouldn't notice it. But because we have to be a bit more analytical and thoughtful, you notice those sort of relied upon tricks that shows use. And this is what I've just noticed in Curb.
Yeah, so Joel, with the Casual Fridays, gets set up for the later scene with Mr. Wiener.
Yeah, exactly right. I do like Larry's sort of like lighthearted gripes about Casual Fridays. He's like, this is my territory. Like I'm the casual, successful, basically retired writer or show creator. Like I'm the one who has to sloth around in jeans and t-shirts. You're a professional lawyer. What are you doing? I did laugh at that.
Yeah, he's going all up in his grill.
Yeah, and he's obviously just joking. Like he's not giving him genuine grief. But I do like Larry's kind of idea that you're a professional. Casual Fridays, they shouldn't be for you. They should be for me.
Exactly, for people who've actually, made a big good living and can retire very comfortably, I should say.
Yeah.
In the next scene, Cheryl and Larry. Cheryl. That'd be like their Brangelina name, their married couple. Sometimes they compound 2 names together, like Brangelina when Brad and Angelina Jolie were together and all that. So Cheryl is theirs.
Yeah,
so
Brennifer. Brangelina. It should be Shari.
Shari. Oh yeah, Shari would work. Yeah. Or
Laryl.
Cherry. Yeah, or Laryl.
Yeah, or Laryl. Actually, I think Laryl's Laryl.
There's probably so many combinations you could go with that. Yeah. Anyway, that lovely couple are about to get ready for the party before Jeff turns up late, and he says that his room service dinner took a bit longer to arrive, hence why he was late. And this is a continuation from Thor from episode 2 when he separates from his wife Susie. So it sounds like he's still living in the hotel.
Yeah, and this is the first time you see Cheryl a bit uncomfortable around Jeff. Like Jeff kind of compliments her. He is being a tiny bit sleazy. I don't think he's meaning to be. I think it's more just awkward nervousness. But Cheryl isn't really into it. But in previous episodes, they've gotten along fine. So it's weird. It's just a weird dynamic that I haven't seen before.
It must be his lime green shirt.
Yeah. I do like how Cheryl's really giving it to Larry in this episode. She tells him that he's not allowed to wear his corduroy pants to the party.
Yeah, that's it.
Blue and black. And Larry's just confused. He's like, what, I have to change it? She's like, yep, trust me. Yeah, so I think Cheryl's just really pissed off at Larry in general, and she's just giving him shit about whatever she can.
And the $10,000 tipped her over the edge. Because that is the reason, like on top of Jeff being late because his food didn't arrive on time, Cheryl says that Larry should change the outfit, like you mentioned before, and it causes them to be late for the surprise party. And they arrive at Barry's house. Barry and his wife Carol are outside. And Carol's upset when she realizes that there's a surprise party for her, and she's upset at Larry.
Yeah, she calls him selfish, I think.
And selfish, yeah. She's like, why are you late? And surprise parties are obviously meant to be very spontaneous, and of course, hence the name a surprise. But Carol obviously is very upset when she finds out there's a whole bunch of people in her house as they walk in the door, and everyone says surprise, and she's obviously not very happy. And Larry and Jeff try to explain to the crowd what's going on.
Yeah, it took me 2 watches to figure out why she was pissed off. At first I thought, does she not want want the surprise party. And, some people don't like surprise parties. And now that she realizes she's getting one, is she annoyed? But I realized that because they were late, they gave away the surprise party because they saw the gift in Larry's arms.
That's right, yeah. So Larry and Jeff mostly. Cheryl just tagged along, but yeah, those two basically spoiled the night for her.
Yeah, and fair enough too. I mean, I'm sure with Barry struggling to get some writing gigs, maybe their life hasn't been so great lately. So a surprise party would be a nice event for them, and then Larry's got to fuck that up too.
Larry just puts a sledgehammer.
And Jeff
too. Yeah, Jeff played a part in this too, not just Larry. So Jeff actually screwed up for once.
That's it.
Everyone's chatting at the party, and Barry's father, Mr. Wiener, he's overtly flirting with Cheryl, and he says that he'll donate a large sum of money to her charity that she's working for, or for her organisation, the NDRC. Before Larry interrupts them, Cheryl goes to the bathroom as Larry tells Mr. Wiener a fake story about his father giving him money before his death so he could write Seinfeld while working as a dry cleaner. A very similar story to Barry. Mr. Wiener is inspired by the story, and he asks Larry for an estate lawyer so he can make a change in his will, and he gives him Joel's details. So Joel Reynolds just gives him the name, and Larry thinks that he'll give Barry his inheritance in advance, and we find out that Mr. Wiener had other intentions.
Yeah, he's like, you'll find out as the scene ends. I think anyone could tell that Larry's story is very convenient and very transparent as well, where he's like, I was working at a laundromat, and my father gave me a quarter of his will, and I bought him a Barker lounge and a big screen TV, and he was comfortable, and the fridge was full of food. It just sounds like something he's just making up on the spot.
And Mr. Wiener is a very intelligent businessman.
Yeah, he seems very sharp, and he seems, especially when it comes to his money, I think he understands, where it goes, and he's very savvy generally, and very savvy with his own money, but he's also very taken with Cheryl. And I think Cheryl's flirting back with him. I think she knows what's going on. She's not a dumb woman. And I think her flirting is kind of this passive aggressive, again, like kind of in line with her being pissed off more than normal with Larry. I think it's almost her just trying to get Larry's goat even more.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Obviously, he's an old man. Obviously, he's got money, but he's not like an attractive, young, good-looking guy. And, Cheryl's just doing it to kind of goad Larry. And also, mind you, also he promises to give her money for the organisation too. So she's probably playing along to get that check.
Yeah, she's definitely got a gender. I don't think she's genuinely attracted to him, and she probably thinks he's an old creep because he's very forward. And, he even refers to their marriage, and he insults her husband in front of him saying, I don't know how that schlub, I love that word, married you. And she's like, I don't know either.
That's another compound word. What is it? Schlob. Slob of something.
Schlub? Yeah, slob and schlub. I don't know what schlub means. I always thought it was like a Yiddish word. Kind of sounds like...
Probably Yiddish, yeah.
Your schlob, your schmuck.
Your schmuck? Yeah, it's probably a word like that.
Yeah.
Well, Wiener, I assume, is Jewish. So, yeah, it's probably probably Jewish.
That's true.
If you're Jewish and you're listening to this, tell us, is schlob a Yiddish word or is it a slang term?
Yeah, I think it just means like idiot or dickhead or loser or whatever.
Yeah,
but
loser.
It's a word that you don't hear often enough. And every time I hear it, I love it, especially when it's said by an American because they've got the right accent and it emphasizes correctly. Schlub.
It should be in the vernacular more often.
I think so, yeah. I'm going to petition America to somehow make it a word that people say more by law. They have to say it at least 3 times a day.
Make the schlob great again. Anyway.
Schlub's your uncle.
Larry is in the driveway the next day and Barry angrily drives in. And obviously, like I mentioned, Mr. Wiener, you think that Mr. Wiener's going to update his will to give Barry, his son, some money, but it turns out in the opposite direction. He tells Larry that Mr. Wiener is at Joel's office to remove him from the will and give it all to Cheryl's charity, his entire estate. He says that his dad thought that Larry made up the story to try and give Barry his money in advance and that they were conspiring together to have this done.
Yeah, Larry is pretty naive to think that his cockamamie bullshit story that he just made up on the spot would be enough to convince a sharp man like Mr. Wiener to or inspire him to alter his will for his son. Like Larry's pretty arrogant and naive, I think, to think that he would have pulled one over on him. It's surprising to see Larry surprised that it didn't work.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that Barry's actually really pissed off at Larry for actually going through with it. He probably didn't expect Larry, he didn't even run it through Barry to say, I'm going to do this story.
Yeah.
He just went out and do it. And I think Barry's like, oh God, it's such an obvious coincidence. And Barry probably knows that his dad's really smart and he can pick out, obviously with business dealings, Mr. Wiener's probably dealt with really dodgy, sales pitches and all that kind of stuff. And he knows he can separate the wheat from the chaff.
Barry's probably aware that his dad's really smart and he can pick a dodgy one. And he read Larry like a book, and he decided to say, screw you, son, I'm going to take you out.
Yeah, and it's another instance of Larry. I think his heart's in the right place. I think he thinks, I want to help my friend Barry out, but there's just it's like it's all heart and no mind. He doesn't think it through. He doesn't think of the consequences, and he doesn't talk about it with Barry, which would have been the right thing to do, not just sort of ethically, because getting involved in someone's family/business affairs, even if you're trying to do the right thing, is pretty, can be pretty precarious. So yeah, his heart's in the right place. He just doesn't execute his goodwill in a very intelligent way.
No. So he just, but like you said, he had good intentions, but no, he certainly didn't think it through.
No.
I guess it's the same. It's a different scene, I guess, but Mr. Wiener meets Joel in his office to discuss his estate, but he's put off by Joel's casual attire. So obviously this is a week later, since Larry and Joel ran into each other. Joel explains that it's casual Fridays, and Mr. Wiener's not impressed. He says that he'll take his business elsewhere, and he really rips into Joel. He's like, you're handling my money and you look like that.
Yeah, he's like, when you handle my business, I want you to be cutting edge. And it's like, I am, we treat your business seriously as casual. And he just doesn't, he doesn't even get the
cowboy.
It's like, you look like a fucking cowboy. Who are you, JR?
Who are you, JR? Joel Reynolds, JR. I love it. You should be in Dallas, not in LA.
Yeah.
I love that. Great.
Yeah, no, this
an old show.
This is my favorite. This is my favorite scene.
Yeah, it's my favorite too. Yeah, I loved it. It was so good. It was a great performance by the actor.
Yeah, I know if Mr. Wiener was the Seinfeld character, he'd be in our top 10 secondary characters, because he's just like a super grumpy, I don't give a shit about anything but me old man.
He's like Alfred Venice a bit.
Yeah, he is. He's a bit
No,
he's a bit more personable as well. Like he obviously has a warmer side because he's flirting with Cheryl. And when Cheryl back in that scene when Cheryl leaves to go to the loo and Larry comes in and starts talking with him, he's fine. Like he's not awkward or mean. But yeah, I can definitely see some Alton Venice traits. He's like Alton Light.
Alton Light, yeah. He's more refined of sorts.
I think his size and his age and his bald head kind of add to the Alton comparison too.
Absolutely, yeah. I could definitely see at least a physical resemblance. Anyway,
Yeah.
back at Larry's house in his front yard, he's still talking to Barry when he gets a call from the acupuncturist's receptionist, and he says that he's feeling better when he's asked by them how he's doing, and that he doesn't require another appointment for a while. And Barry asks Larry to fix the situation with his father, and he says that Mr. Wiener is meant to see Cheryl at the same Japanese restaurant from before. And again, just like you mentioned in the Japanese restaurant scene, Steve, it's another convenient cut to a place that we've already been to.
Yeah, exactly. Like Larry doesn't need to figure out where the restaurant is. He knows where it is. And it's just a convenient coincidence.
Yeah. In the next scene, Mr. Wiener and Cheryl are at lunch, and Mr. Wiener's really cozied up to Cheryl. They're sitting on the same booth, and she's really close, and he's feeding her. She's drinking lots of shots of sake.
Yeah, I think he's trying to get her drunk and do more than just business with her.
You want that donation? Because he says in the previous scene that he's going to give her a deposit. It's like a double entendre. Do you remember?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was like, I'll give you a
I do remember that. I did.
It's like, oh, God.
I didn't see it as a euphemism, but now that you mention it, it's quite possible.
Certainly a euphemism. Larry arrives to interrupt the meeting. He tries to explain that he was not in cahoots with Barry for his inheritance, and Mr. Wiener doesn't believe him. The waiter from the week before spots Larry, recognizes him, and he runs at him with a cup of water. He throws it in his direction. Larry ducks, and Mr. Wiener gets drenched by the water, and he ends up having a fatal heart attack.
Now I can understand. I didn't realize this when I was watching it, but just now I understand why Barry was so confident that his father was going to die soon. If a cup of water is enough to give you a heart attack, obviously he was on his last legs.
He was, yeah. Health-wise, yes. Certainly. I know, it's crazy. Like, just a cup of water. I think even the shock, I don't think it was the water itself. I think it was just the shock of getting wet. Someone like Mr. Wiener, someone of his stature getting water thrown at him. Yeah, it's an absolute shock.
I guess so. But, I mean, it's not like it would have been totally unexpected. He would have seen the waiter coming at him and throwing the glass of water. Like, he would have seen it all the events unfold before the water landed on him. But I guess, it was still enough to make his heart conk out.
That's right. And how good's that shot of Larry, that close-up, where, off the camera, Mr. Wiener, falls on the table, and then his food just goes on Larry's face.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
No,
a great shot.
I like the way that this shot was seen. The way that this shot was seen. The way this scene was shot. It was good.
It was good, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the only highlights of the episode.
I've just noticed as well that Larry doesn't seem at all, I think he's fully aware, but he doesn't seem at all bothered by Mr. Wiener's very, very obvious advances towards Cheryl. He's so blasé about it.
Yeah, he probably thinks there's nothing to it because he probably trusts Cheryl enough not to do anything.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
In the second last scene of the episode, at his wake, rather, for Mr. Wiener, Larry, Cheryl, and Jeff arrive. Barry's cousin Doug claims that Larry threw the water at his uncle, even though it was the waiter. Larry says indeed it was the waiter, and later on, Barry gives Larry the $5,000 check that he promised him, and Carol tells everyone about their scheme. So obviously Barry, obviously confides in his wife and told Carol that he's going to give Larry money when he dies, or when his father dies.
Yeah, and Carol's not too happy about it. She overhears the conversation between Barry and Larry, and she makes a comment, and then it kind of just escalates from there into a physical brouhaha,
because Doug thinks that Larry had Mr. Wiener killed for only $5,000. He was, what does he call him, an assassin or something like that?
You're a bounty hunter.
You're a bounty hunter, that's it. You killed my uncle for $5,000. And he attacks Larry by putting him in a headlock, and of course, another convenient thing, Larry's neck gives out.
Yeah, exactly, which ties right back to the opening scene.
That's right, and in the final scene, back at the acupuncturist, Larry is back for an appointment. The acupuncturist says that Larry actually owes him $5,000 because he told his receptionist that he feels fine, and he emphasizes that the bet was that if he felt better, that he'll get the $5,000, and he told the receptionist you felt better. So he's right.
Yeah, and I think as soon as Larry realizes that he owes him the $5,000, he's very desperate for trying to figure out a way to get out of it, because he starts saying that he starts trying to explain the difference between 100% better and just slightly better, saying that there's a language barrier when it's very obvious the acupuncturist can speak perfect English. There would be absolutely no translation nothing would be lost in translation at all, but he's just trying to sort of throw stuff out there to see if it sticks.
Larry's like an animal trying to get out of a cage in desperation.
Yeah, it's just like, oh no, it's a language difference, and it's like this guy, it's not like he moved to America 2 years ago and English is still something he's coming to terms with. He is fully integrated into America. He can speak perfect English. There's no misinterpretation at all. He just doesn't want to give him $5,000 because he knows that.
Yeah, because he knows that's the case.
Yeah.
And after some arguing about what percentage is considered better, Larry offers to transfer his check from Barry to the acupuncturist to endorse it. When he asks the acupuncturist about the flowers, they say that it's a Japanese tradition, and he stares at Larry, and that's the end of the episode. So we never find out why those orchids were given to him. It's quite ambiguous.
I don't know if the acupuncturist was just making that up, saying, it's an ancient Japanese tradition, or, if he had an ulterior motive and he didn't want to say what was going on. But it was a weird ending. It was very abrupt.
It was, and it was kind of like one of those, I don't know, it's like a MacGuffin, those orchids. And it's something like, the episode didn't really need to add the orchids, because the orchids are kind of like, it didn't lead to anything.
Yeah, the only thing I think it added was the orchids themselves were, neither here nor there, but the mystery of the orchids, which Larry asks everyone he sees through the episode, like, what do you think? And he even asks Mr. Wiener, like, that's his first conversation point when he sits down. Is it a custom in Japan, professionals, doctors, dentists, acupuncturists, to give flowers to other professionals? And Mr. Wiener's like, what do I know? Like, I don't care if they take it up the arse in Japan.
They might take it up the ass in Japan. How would I know?
Yeah. So I think the only value they added was, a few jokes and a few conversation points for Larry through the episode. But yeah, beyond that, they were kind of just a weird, unnecessary plot point.
If you had to hypothesize why he was sent the orchids, what do you think?
I can't see any other reason other than it is an ancient Japanese custom, or maybe it was like some sort of psyop, and it was to confuse Larry, to sort of to get advantage of it over him or something. I don't know.
Maybe in ancient Japan, sending orchids to your enemy was like a warning sign, or you sent them to someone you didn't like, or maybe like samurai would send them to, or emperors would send orchids to like with the kiss of death in the mafia, that sort of thing. Maybe it was like kiss of death kind of thing. Like maybe if you sent orchids to buy the emperor or the yakuza or something, then that's kind of like the kiss of death. So you're going to die soon.
Yeah,
it's probably one of those kind of things.
Yeah, it could be a warning. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, a warning of some sort. Yeah, that was my second guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty potentially interesting take.
Yes, but anyway, that was The Acupuncturist. Now, Stephen, I give this episode out of 5 Larrys. We rate each episode out of 5. 2.5, just like last week. How about you?
Again, like last week, I give it 2.
Oh, 2, yeah. Pretty lazy writing in parts. And yeah, you were right about, some things just conveniently happening. But to be fair, I guess they do kind of lead on to the plot points and they do flesh out the plot a little bit. So I give a bit more leeway than what you do regarding these convenient things. But yeah, no, not really the best written episode.
Yeah, and I guess I just didn't, a lot of episodes provide laughs from the shock value of the, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to Larry, or I can't believe Larry said that or did that. None of what Larry did or said in this episode was very shocking or controversial or made him, he put his foot in it a bunch and he kind of fucked up the surprise party, and he, very indirectly was responsible for the death of Mr. Wiener, but it was all just sort of incidental stuff that happened along the way.
Yeah.
So I think that was lacking in the episode too, just those situations where Larry says something or does something and it just leads to these ridiculous circumstances.
Yeah, season 2 overall, we've done 6 episodes, but season 2 for me hasn't been as strong as season 1. There's been 1 or 2 fantastic episodes this season, but the rest of them have just been pretty average or below average. Whereas season 1's had more hits,
Yeah, I don't remember there being any. I think one episode we gave maybe 3 out of 5, but anything below that is all been season 2.
Yeah, I think I gave Thor, it might have been Thor or another episode this season. I gave it a 5 out of 5. Might have been Thor. I really enjoyed that one. But yeah, other than that, yeah, they've been pretty subpar. Well, hopefully the tail end of season 2 picks up.
Yeah, it might just be a bit of a mid-season lull and, it might come back strong. We've got to remember as well, the show's been going for, nearly 20 years, actually 20 years, but 10 seasons over 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
Yeah, most shows, unless they're just really awesome straight out of the gates, it's rare that a show is hitting its stride halfway through season 2. It's still establishing things and trying to figure out what works and doesn't work. So we've got to take that into account as well, I think.
Yeah, even Seinfeld took 3 seasons to really get going,
Yeah, my favorite seasons are 2 and 3. I like those more simple, older school episodes, but the classic period of when it was just firing on all cylinders for the general fan base was definitely season 4 onwards. So yeah, we've got to allow Larry to and the other writers of Curb to figure that out as they go along.
Absolutely, but I am really enjoying doing this Curbcast podcast and also rewatching. I've watched 1 and 2 already, but I've never seen 3 and beyond. So it's great to rewatch 1 and 2, and I'm looking forward to future episodes. But that is another episode of Curbcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week for episode 7 of season 2. My name is Ivan.
And I'm Stephen.
And we'll catch you then, and we'll also catch you for Bidwabask next week as well. Take care.
Bye now.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is part of Mishmash Media, an independent podcast network. Follow us on social media at Mishmash Media AU or support us on Patreon. All those links are in the show notes.